Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Special Education Advisory Committee on Thursday, October 16th, 2025. I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this home is area to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas and Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. To follow that up with our human rights, Indigenous and human rights, the Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subjected to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to providing learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from all forms of discrimination, oppression, harassment, and harm. All right, and moving on, I'd like to start with our roll call. Start with some regrets. We have regrets this evening from trustees Kelly Miller and Michelle Arsenault. Regrets from our chair, Eva Kyriakides. Her alternate here is here this evening. And we also have regrets from Sensa Renette Burrell from Autism Ontario. Then I will start the roll call with Michelle.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Amanda Reed, and I'm the early years specialist here at the DDSB. Work with the early years department. I'm here this evening just to present on with my colleague Jackie, and I look forward to working with all of you today.
Hi there, I am Jackie Perdavani, and I'm the early years manager here at the DDSB.
Jessica Wells, member at large.
Jen McLaughlin, representing Savannah.
Elizabeth Daniel, member at large. Tim Merger, Durham Elementary School administrator.
Everyone, I'm Joe Ridley from NTN. I am system lead with Student Services.
And I'm Nancy Adams, and I'm also a system lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Lindsay Clegg, secondary school representative, the DSAA.
Allison Amer, Easter Seals.
Donna Edwards, trustee for Ajax.
Jordan Kyriakides, Association for Bright Children.
Lisa Ryan, reporting.
Laura Bliss, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services.
Our Kelly Durham Down Syndrome Association and Vice Chair today. Moving on to the agenda, I just want to make a really quick jaunt here. We have a presentation today from our early years folks, Jackie and Amanda. What they're presenting actually goes hand in hand with one of the community concerns that we have. So what I'd like to say is we'll talk. Well, Nora, if you want to talk about the community concern, the first piece, and then we'll jump to presentation and then go to the second community concern. We have two today. That's everyone's all right with that. We'll just slightly do a little loop back in that and keep going with that. So is anyone have an issue with that? No, can I get a motion just for that small jaunt? Allison, second, Donna, all in favor? All right, motion carried. All right, then moving on to approval of the minutes from September 4th, 2025. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes from last month? No, seeing none. Could I get an approval for the minutes for last month? Motion for approval. Allison, second. Donna, thank you, ladies. All in favor? All right, motion approved. All right, then moving on to our staff reports.
And just for you, just a quick request. I'm wondering if you could also under number 7, move the multi-year strategic plan good news video. Is it possible just to move it up to speaker?
Yes, please do. Yes, please do. You do everything you can. That's
Okay.
your space. Off you
Perfect.
go.
Thank you.
Yes.
So wanted to start off with, we have a new multi-year strategic plan news report. I think you're probably used to seeing them at board. And
Half of DDSB students.
Oh,
Students and staff were
Okay,
excited.
let it play, Joe. It's okay. Let it play. It's okay. Let's just go right into it. Go for it, Joe. Thank you.
To share a sample of stories that highlight our multi-year strategic plan, MYSP, Pillar of Meaningful Learning. Over the summer, the DDSB led several learning initiatives, including Great Beginnings and the Great Beginnings Afrocentric Program for Black Student Success. These kindergarten transition programs designed to ensure a positive start to school in September, provided culturally grounded and engaging experience for our youngest learners. Our summer camps also offered meaningful opportunities for growth and exploration, especially through our outdoor education programs at Durham Forest. Summer school programs across the district accommodated the attendance of over 12,500 secondary students. In-person summer school courses were held in July and asynchronous learning was offered in August. The annual Getting Ready for High School program prepared new grade 9 students for classes at their local high school, easing the transition into the new school year. Through their new After the Bell program, the Ignite Durham Learning Foundation, IDLF, filled cupboards with groceries and provided gift cards for families who needed support through the summer. From Stuff the Bus drives to lively bargain sales, IDLF worked hand in hand with local charities and neighbors to make sure every student steps into September with a backpack full of supplies, confidence, and hope. At the end of August, school and office administrators gathered at Uxbridge Secondary School for the DDSB's annual Activation Day event. Highlights of the day included an update on the DDSB multi-year strategic plan, the Maxwell B. Nelson Leadership Award presentation to Principal Alicia Russell, a student panel discussion, and engaging breakout sessions. Facility services kept busy over the summer with heating and ventilation upgrades, water main replacements, washroom upgrades, accessibility projects, roofing, and window upgrades. Custodial teams cleaned facilities, refinished floors at all locations, and attended training sessions at the Education Center. The maintenance department completed many work orders across the district, assisted with school-based project work, and are in the process of hiring new staff. The first day of school burst to life across the district with eager footsteps on freshly polished floors and the warm greetings of principals, teachers, and support staff. Families and students buzzed with anticipation as a sense of possibility filled the air. Here's to a year of growth, discovery, and moments that will inspire us all.
Thank you to Clara from R.H. Cornish Public School for reading this month's MYSP update.
So a very cute way to start off just sharing. I think it's a great way to share a staff report in terms of what we've been working on. So wanted to bring that forward. I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Joe's going to share a few bits and pieces with us, and I'll come back at the end for the draft.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share some great news from the system, including our Student Services Impact Update. This update is really focused on supporting student engagement and attendance. I want to highlight the document that was shared with everyone. It's an 11-page document, best practices for engagement and attendance, created by our federal social work team. And really focused there, very high level, is to help schools and help us as a board create a culture of care versus a culture of compliance. And what does that mean? We recognize as a system that regular school attendance is a critical first step to our students, and it helps build knowledge, skills, and habits that they need to succeed. However, what has been noted is that about 1/4 of youth in Canada will experience some type of school avoidance that's provided by Anxiety Canada. And historically, those absences have tended to be viewed, school avoidance, as truancy or as a a student's choice or a family choice that requires a discipline focus. And this work and document here really does strive to change that to an engagement focus lens. So just as very high level, really we're trying to reconsider. This work is to reconsider and examine our engagement and attendance processes and approaches in a trauma-informed way, and invites us to consider, does this school policy support a culture of care or a culture of compliance? The document, as you can see, is full of great tips and suggestions and guidance for school level staff to help to support that and really increase those pull factors that draw students and families into a school. I think I would be remiss if I didn't take time to highlight the great work of our attendance counselors here at DDSB. Our attendance counselors are social workers who hold a master's degree in social work and are registered with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Work Services. So they're doing fabulous work. We wanted to bubble that up and bring that work to you. And hopefully you'll have an opportunity to look at that. Thank you to all those who put in the time, energy, and effort to create that document and to the work that's happening at the schools to really build engaging spaces for our students. The second piece that I would like to share is the Life Beyond High School event. This event is happening here at the board office on Wednesday, November 5th. It is going from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. This is an invite to come out and join us here at this event. The event has been going on for quite a while here in DDSB and has become, according to people I spoke to today, the largest scale event in all of Durham, where we invite out community partners, where families are able to come and be connected with program supports and services across the Durham region. Some of the organizations that will be joining us are Development Services Ontario, Ontario Disability Support Program, Family Support Services, and more. Just to give you a heads up, that last year, there were 47 local and regional community partners participated, and this year we are projecting a slight increase in that, so there will be more people coming out to participate. I do want to share that events like this don't happen without the great work of our transition coordinators that do phenomenal work. So we have Ashley, we have Sade, we have Braden, who really put in a ton of time, energy, and effort to make this happen. It starts well before August to make this event happen. They create a full event guide, which is reader friendly, it's concise, it provides information for families on all of the community partners who are there. It has their location or contact info. It's also fully available online and updated. It's AOG compatible and accessible. And in addition to that, this year, we're also adding snacks and baked goods provided by some of our PLP students and our secondary students who are providing that opportunity, who will be giving us some of the food to enjoy. So come on out and enjoy that event. I also want to thank our instructional facilitators and staff who come around and also help to support on the night. It's a really, really great event, and hopefully if you could book it in your calendar, we'd love to see you. We'd love to see you out.
Thanks, Joe. I think if you could flip to the next slide for me, I think we have IEP handbook. I wanted to share that this fall in September, we rolled out an individualized education plan writing guide for educators. So I wanted to share just the highlights of this document with you. So let's let Joe get settled here. Okay. So you can head to the next one, Joe. So we rolled it out to all administrators and certs in September. The reason for the document, we recognized that there was a need for support in writing individualized education plans or IEPs. And so we collaborated with ETFO and DDSB to create the guide. And what we were looking to do is really create a consistent approach for the work and the development of IEPs in our schools. So next slide, please, Joe. So it's really grounded, that the guidebook is grounded in consultation through multiple departments. And really, as I said, the aim is to provide that really unified approach to creating the IEP in alignment with ministry policies and our professional responsibilities. So what we feel we've created something that's very clear for our educators in creating meaningful and actionable IEPs for students and families across the system. So the key highlights from that document, it's organized into very specific sections for educators so that they follow the order of the actual IEP. So when as you're writing, you can follow it step by step. It's designed to help educators navigate PowerSchool, which is the system that we use to create the IEP, and build from the supportive sections that we have in what's called PowerSchool. So it really contains very specific resources and instructions for working with the student's IEP. So how to create a consultation log and what needs to be included, and when we're putting in assessment data, and who are the resources that need to be included. So that's all. We provided exemplars in that for staff as well. And the intention is that the guide is to be used by a side-by-side when working with the students throughout the year. All right. So I just wanted to quickly share with you the table of contents. So these are the general sections that were included in the guide. I won't go through all of them step by step, but as you can see, it's quite comprehensive in terms of what's to be included and next steps. And so there's also some really great appendices that we included that are supporting the work. So as you can see, we have FAQs and checklists, and I mentioned appendices and samples of IEPs that teachers use. So that's the bits and pieces there. And so wanted to I know part of our conversation at a previous meeting was just in discussion around IEPs and implementation of IEPs. So this is a great starting point in terms of bringing consistency across the system. So I wanted to bring it forward today. And so that brings us to the end of staff report.
Fantastic. Any questions for anything in the staff report? Oh.
Hi, sorry, thank you. Sorry, I'm late. There was really, really terrible traffic.
Yes, there was.
I was just wondering, because I've obviously missed some stuff. Was this the presentation about the IEP draft document?
So this is the IEP Writer's Guide for Educators.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I had some questions about that, if it's okay if I ask them.
Sure.
Okay. So, I have a few questions if that's okay. So the first one is just why has the board adopted language that differs from the ministry's IEP resource guide, and how will consistency with the provincial policy be ensured?
So can you share with me which language?
So some of the language that concerns me is around what can come across as like some fear mongering around the use of modifications.
Okay.
So in all of the cases that, sorry, I'm out of breath. In all of the cases that it mentions modifications in the writing guide, it makes a note of this can limit future pathways. We prefer not to modify, and that language isn't consistent with what's in the ministry document.
Okay. So can you and I connect about specific pieces that I just want to make sure I understand completely the areas you have concern about? Would it be possible for me to reach out and connect with you? We'll go through it.
Sure.
It's in draft form right now, so I would appreciate that feedback.
Okay, can I just mention it here though, just for families who are watching and listening as well. The other concern I have is also around the language around alternative expectations as well. I'm wondering as well, because I see this difference between this draft that's been presented by the board and the ministry document in terms of similar language around alternative expectations, in terms of like the language that I'm seeing in the draft document is this limits pathways, and that's not consistent with what I'm seeing in the ministry document, or what I know to be consistent with how the ministry presents these items in terms of IEPs and supports for students. There's also language that talks about how alternative expectations need to be tied to learning skills, and I don't see that being reflected in the ministry document as well. So I'm confused about why that's being suggested as a need for our board with writing IEPs.
Okay, and without seeing it in front of me, hard for me to answer that right here, but happy to bring those answers back. Certainly at the following meeting, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so let me just scan through here. My other concern is just around equity and accountability with that as well. So how that again, like you're welcome to review it, but just the way the language is presented makes me concerned that educators will see that and then feel like it's not a good thing to put these things in place to support students, and then students are then going to be missing out on the supports that they need to fill gaps. And that can start to come across almost like gatekeeping in a way. So we're talking about like making things more inclusive for all students, but then I worry that that can be the language that's being used can be misinterpreted by educators as well. The other concerns I had were around the timeline. On one of the first pages, it has like this really nice like infographic with a timeline for educators about when these different components of the IEP process should be happening. And on there, it says that it says under October that modifications and accommodations should start to be implemented. And that concerns me because I feel like if a child has an existing IEP from a previous year, then those should be carried over first thing in September. We shouldn't be waiting until the 30th school day when IEPs are sent home to start implementing accommodations and modifications. So again, just looking at clarifying that language and that expectation there. I also wanted to bring up a concern about it coming across like IEPs won't be updated after the second report card. IEPs are supposed to be a working document, so I think it should be really clear in this document for educators that they can be updated at any time. I was also confused by a statement in there about how strengths and needs can only be adjusted during an IPRC process, because again, I don't see consistency with that with the ministry document about IEP writing. It does in the ministry document, it does kind of imply that there should be a correlation between the IPRC strengths and needs, but it also says that it's a flexible document that should be supporting students where they're at, and as interests and strengths and needs can change throughout a year. It seems like a waste, like, I don't know that it's intended this way, but it seems like a waste of resources if a parent is saying, okay, my child doesn't have this strength anymore, or now they have this new need that's come up. And then we say, okay, we need to have a whole IPRC meeting just to change their strengths that are listed on their IEP. That seems silly when it should just be more flexible. As long as there's no like major disagreement between educators and families about the strengths and needs, I don't know why we would have to waste all the resources having an IPRC meeting to adjust that. The last thing that I was confused about was there was a lot of strong language talking about a recommendation of only 3 strengths and needs being listed. And it said a maximum of 5. And again, I don't see that being reflected in the ministry document. I understand like not wanting to put excessive things that aren't related to goals in the IEP. And that's how it's phrased in the ministry document. But I don't see anywhere that it says there should be a limit. And again, like I don't see it benefiting kids to limit what their needs are. Like many kids might have more than 5 needs. There's more than 5 curriculum areas. There's more than 5 learning skills. Kids could have many needs that might need to be addressed by the IEP. Appreciate that feedback.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I was going to say that, question and I've lost it, but, the Transition to Life event is a great event and I always attend it. Unfortunately, it's the same night as my AMM for Special Olympics. So I'm not present because I have to be there, but we will have a table there, which is great. We have one of our council members will be there missing the AMM. But it is a really great night and I'm looking at, I'm really going to miss that. But it was more on I think it was more on the attendance. We talked about that, of course, there's been the in-service on writing IEPs, but we're on the attendance management and this, the document is a really good document, but I just wondering if there was in-service also done with staff at the beginning of the year as far as this whole practice of culture of care and ensuring that working through it because when a child is in need, particularly when they're struggling to attend, that contact is really crucial for them to continue sort of thing. So I was just wondering if there was in service on that or is there going to be?
I can answer that, Donna. So so we did roll it out. We did train when the certs came to their learning community. We rolled it out with all certs. We did train with them. Shared it with all administrators, and administrators presented it at their August staff meeting to all staff.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 8, the board report. Donna.
Well, we did our October standing meeting was actually in September due to religious observances and so forth. So one of the things I was going to highlight was the summer learning, but you've heard a lot about it in the video, which was really great because we did have a summer learning impact report that we provided to the board. And as you heard a lot of it referred to in the video. We also we had there was a report actually, or we have a professional learning working group with trustees, and they also provided a report on some of the PD that we're looking forward to. One of the biggest items, though, was a motion that came forward, particularly to talk about the role of trustees. As you know, it's kind of been in the newspaper that trustees or the role of the trustee is not seen as going to be very important. It's going to change. We won't know until December. Basically, is a plan going forward. I don't really want to talk about that, but what I do want to talk a little bit about some of the concerns that we've heard from supervised boards, and I'm sure you've also seen those articles in the newspaper where SEACs are not being live streamed up for those supervised boards and basically limiting access to parents who basically cannot attend SEAC meetings, and they really do count on looking at those live streams when they can and see what's happening, as well as the fact that I know as a trustee one of the major concerns calls I do get are from parents with students with special needs within the system, and asking questions and directions, and they're not getting return phone calls, etc. because honestly, we deal with a lot of those things. Just here's the process, here's where you can go, etc., and directing that, and they're just not getting return calls back, and a lot of them now are being referred directly to the minister's office, basically, and minister's office, and it's not getting responded to. So there's huge concerns there. I'm not necessarily concerned. The role of trustee is not necessarily a question. It's that public voice and that public access for parents that is a huge concern from our perspective. And One of the focuses that motion was around on trustees was basically getting for people to understand what the role of trustee is, because there is some much misconception as far as what we do. And next week is local governance week, and a lot of municipalities talk about the mayor and so forth, and the councillors, but trustees and very rarely get mentioned. So the Ontario Public School Board Association has for a few years have put a present sort of template for trustees to go and present to grade 5 classes and to grade 10 civics classes on what the role is, and basically talk about governance, and as far as that we do represent the voice. So I know I'm booked now for 3 presentations next week to within these various schools, and I know many of the other trustees are doing that. And as I said, it's not really to save our jobs; it's to save the voice of people, to community and people, because that is a voice too. We're elected by constituents to be the voice of the people and to bring it forward as a whole, collectively, concerns around the table. And so it's trying time. We'll find out at the end of December, supposedly, sometime in December, what the plan of the role is. There's been various options that have been discussed in the news, but we really don't know what it is going to be at this point in time. So that was the major talk about. And then there was the introduction of the Student Senate Leadership Award, which basically there's two awards that will be given for, I think it's from 6 to 8, I think, 9 to 12. They're written somewhere around here. 5 to 8 and then 9 to 12. So it's a new award, as well as there was a memo on the generative AI tools approved for staff, and we've had that presentation here, but it was sort of an update as far as approved tools. And so we know that Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini have been approved from staff, and Gemini for students at this point in time. And there's a whole process to get other AI tools approved for use within schools as well. And and of course, the other thing is we've also had some correspondence around a kindergarten program up in the north that the childcare spaces that we had put in, the project was canceled by the ministry. And because the fact that the funds that we originally put the project in, got some money funds, by the time we went out for tender, it cost so much more, and the ministry was going to add and asked us to go find other partners. We couldn't find partners in it, so it got canceled. So we have some very upset parents there as well. It's we build what we get funded. Like, it's as simple as that. We don't have the extra money here. All budgets, basically, we managed to pass a balanced budget, but through discussions here, they're very, very tight.
Any questions for Donna? No? All right, then, moving on to number 9, community concerns. So we can start with 9A.
We're going to split them into 2, if that's okay. We had 2 left over from September that we brought forward to this month. The reason I'm splitting is because our early years team is here to help support the response to the first community concern. So we'll bring it forward, let them do their thing with us, and then I'll come back with the second, if that's okay. So the first community concern to bring forward tonight, the current practice of discouraging families of kindergarten students from accessing the IPRC process. So a lack of IEPs being offered to kindergarten students with qualifying diagnoses. and the challenge this creates for a smooth transition to grade 1. The difficulties family face in messaging the IPRC requests later due to these early refusals. So I think it's important to note and start with that once a child is enrolled in school, parents can request an IPRC at any time. The IPRC process is a formal process, as you know, that meets and the committee meets and decides if a student should be identified as exceptional, and if so, what the placement that best meets the needs of the student. For our youngest learners, those in our early years programs, they're just beginning that learning journey. So we believe that in most cases, the most inclusive placement for those students is the regular class with indirect support, with appropriate accommodations and supports in place to meet their needs. So for the 2024-2025 school year, so last year, we had over 350 kindergarten students who had IEPs. And as a result of that IPRC process in our system, accommodations are available. It's important, as you know, accommodations are available to all students, and you do not require an IPRC meeting or an IEP to access accommodations. What Jackie and Amanda are going to present to us tonight is essentially the kindergarten curriculum. The 4 frames are written to meet kids, the individual needs of students. Our intention of our IEP is to begin to create an individualized program for our students to support their needs. And the kindergarten program is written as an individualized program. And you'll be able, I think, to walk you through some examples of what that looks like in a classroom tonight. So we'll have them do the presentation, and then certainly I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have afterwards. But I think the key that we're hoping to bring forward that supports in our early years programs are individualized to student needs and responsive to the specific needs of the student at that moment. And in terms of the transition to grade 1 and concerns about that smooth transition without an IEP, careful transition planning at the school, it can still take place. You do not need to have an IEP to have a transition plan meeting with parents and staff at the table and community partners. And there's things that schools naturally do to support that transition, but things like whether it's social stories, visiting the classrooms, going out to the big yard, having the opportunity to meet the teacher, and often we'll sit in class in the grade 1 classes, and all those opportunities are still available without that IPRC program, an important part of the work that we do to transition students. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our team to do a little activity. I think we will likely, once they get us into our activities, we'll have to probably pause the camera just because we're all going to be talking.
It's going to be too much. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So take it away.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for having us today. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Jackie Portamini. I am the early years manager here at the Durham School Board. I am an early child educator and a teacher as well. And I've worked in our board under both roles of an EC in the classroom and as a teacher in many grades, but also specifically in kindergarten. So that's my background, and I have the privilege of doing the role I have now in supporting the system with those kindergarten learners.
And good evening, everybody. As I shared earlier as well, my name is Amanda Glade. I'm the early years specialist here. I have a little bit of a different background from Jackie. I am a registered early childhood educator and do have background in childcare. I actually came previously from working at Grandview Kids in their client services team. And then came into the board and I've enjoyed being the early years department and looking forward to being here with you all today.
Awesome. So we're just hoping to set the foundation around understanding the kindergarten program and really some of the foundational beliefs it has and how it really is designed. The ministry is intentionally designed to really support all learners. So we want to start off with this quote that is a quote that we use all the time. It really underlines the foundation of the kindergarten program. It's written in here multiple times. If you go through the 110 pages of front matter in the kindergarten program, which is the meat and potatoes of it, and it's really descriptive and really gets into the notion of getting to know all students and meeting where they're at. And the program is designed very openly to do that. So the quote, as you can see on the screen, all children are competent, capable of complex thinking, curious, and rich in potential experience. And you'll see this quote around all of our kindergarten stuff, because that is truly the belief that this program honors. And a bit of background, I guess, of the kindergarten program is that it was sort of designed through the left document that came first. So early learning for every child today, and then through to how does learning happen, which is a ministry document, and it supports learning for children 0 to 6 and across all earlier settings in the province, right? So this is how does learning happen? It's the framework that created the kindergarten program, and it's for all children, regardless of whether they're in childcare, they go to early on settings, they are in school-based settings. That is really the foundation of how the kindergarten came to be. We'll talk about a little bit of 4 frames of kindergarten, just how the program is designed. And those are based off how does learning happen, and they have 4 things. Oh, gosh. We have 4 foundations for learning. So they just grew them into the kindergarten program, and that's really how it was designed. So to get us into the kindergarten mind frame, because I know all of us were in kindergarten like 5 years ago, right? That's where we're at. We wanted you're inviting you to engage in some learning around the room. So there are a few, I think about 3 centers that we have sort of set up, or learning opportunities. They're typical of different things you might see in kindergarten. So we really want you to kind of get up, move around, and go to the different areas as much as you can in the quick time that we have. And engage with the materials there and look what's there and think about the learning that can happen there. And the 3 main things are to have fun, be creative, and be innovative. We'll give you about 5 minutes to get up, stretch your legs, honestly check out the kindergarten experience and have fun.
We'll pause for a second. We'll go off camera. All right. Welcome back, everybody.
So thank you so much for stepping into our world, and hopefully we had on our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, sometimes 6, when they get to the end of their year 2 brains on. So I just want to pose some questions to the group while you were engaging in the various activities around the room. We saw really cool happening. What did you notice? What did you wonder? What did you hear, see, or feel? So just kind of open-ended questions. Anyone wants to run with some thoughts? Don't be shy.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love how the questions that are posed are so open-ended. So there was an opportunity for anyone to bring their experiences, their connections, their abilities to the question and kind of take it in whatever direction that they are relevant to them.
Awesome.
There's no wrong answer, which is fantastic. So other than I can't draw.
Dog is awful. She gets it off, but my depiction of her.
So hold yours up again.
Oh, okay.
And then Tara and I were beside each other. So what's interesting is I found myself, I kept looking to see what other people were doing because I needed to have some reassurance that I was on the right track. But I did notice that I was using words and Tara chose not to use any words. That wasn't a word, but not use words, but just draw. So I stopped drawing and failed.
As someone who tends to be more of an observer to start things, but as I grow comfortable in situations, I liked that at each station there was still an opportunity to do that. And if that was my entry point versus someone else's.
Wait time kindergarten's little friends take time.
I learned something new from somebody else.
See, exactly. So I don't know. So that's a good one. That's right. I did the cat. Like purple. I learned so many things from that small window of time.
And I'm on Amazon buying What Do You Do with an Idea?
Because I love that book.
You know, it's like, please, no. So awesome. So that was sort of our segue kind of into talking about the kindergarten program, and just really, you guys really highlighted the things that we wanted you to kind of experience. That we hope is really the goal of the kindergarten program that students experience in the classroom. And that's really those multiple entry points into learning and those multiple outcomes in learning. And as we sort of talk about the kindergarten program a little bit more, that is hopefully something that we're trying to, that you'll see and how we highlight the expectations in the kindergarten program are written in a way, purposely written so that they're open-ended and there's a lot of ways to engage and show learning for children. And they're actually very much encouraged to show their learning in many different ways. So,
Yeah. And just to echo what Jackie was saying, obviously 5 minutes does not give enough time to fully, embrace our inner 4 and 5 and sometimes 6-year-olds. But we did appreciate you even just seeing people go from different stations, and also that recognition that, if one station is calling to you right now, that's great, but that doesn't mean that you have to stay there and stick it out for the entire duration. There's opportunities to explore and see whatever is of interest to you and where your sort of natural curiosity they're going. Just kind of going off of what the kindergarten program foundation is. Again, the program was built off of how does learning happen. And in the early years, as we know, children learn best through play. Play is a child's work. That's sort of the understanding of how young children build their knowledge and understanding of this crazy world, all of the learning that happens in those first, certainly first 4 years, and we usually talk about, but we really look at those first, 0 to 6. Those years have so much growth and development. And so the kindergarten program is really based on a based model as the foundation. And it's driven in an inquiry stance where we have that structure with every child can participate at their own level and engage in the learning process. So again, recognizing that every child learns potentially in their own unique way, and that's celebrated in the kindergarten program because we see that, if we had one structure for everyone to do something, that would not be successful for every child. So the way that it's crafted is that we really are responsive to each individual learner. And so as a kindergarten team with an educator, an ECE and a teacher, they really are those co-learners in that space. So they sit in that inquiry stance where they're constantly learning alongside the children. So they're not coming in as the experts. They're not coming in as, thou shalt listen to everything I say. Obviously, they come as the more knowledgeable other, but they're coming as keeping that curiosity at the forefront and learning alongside the children who are, constantly engaging in different experiences. And using that opportunity to observe where children are at right now and seeing where we can build them for future learning and development. So really focusing on keeping that asset lens of what children are successful at right now, what they're thriving in, what they're doing well, acknowledging that, and then seeing where can we build that learning from here. So that's kind of, again, looking at that foundation of what the kindergarten program is. As Jackie sort of alluded to earlier, the kindergarten program is built around 4 frames. And so the 4 frames are belonging and contributing, self-regulation and well-being, problem solving and innovating, and demonstrating math and literacy behaviors. And we have those 4 quarters that make up that whole program, where we traditionally think when we hear from families, what is my child learning? When are they going to know their alphabet? When are they going to know to count to 10? And that's 1/4 of what we're focused on in kindergarten. What we recognize is that in order to be successful as learners, we have to have that solid foundation. We have to feel that sense of well-being in our learning environment. We have to be able to regulate our emotions and learn, that sense of well-being and working and being in that social setting. And that problem solving and innovating is so key. So all of those factors together kind of encompass that full version of the kindergarten program, which also shapes our assessment practices as well. And then the expectations within the program do specifically state that children can show their learning by saying, doing, or representing. And that does not mean that they have to do all 3. It is not mandated which of those 3 they have to do. It is open-ended for what that means. And so much of the program is also written in a way where it is intentionally what we would kind of allude to vague. And that's okay, that vagueness, because it leads to that open-ended flexibility, which is so important when supporting young children. And from a strengths-based and flexible program, so again, kind of thinking about that program being flexible and responsive to our students, the kindergarten program is framed to view children through an asset lens, where again, educators meet children where they're at. So we're not focusing on what children can't do, we're focusing on what they're doing now and where we can build that learning moving forward. So again, we're at the start of our learning journey in kindergarten, and we need to know, okay, what are we exceeding in right now, and what we're successful with, and where can we continue to build that learning for the future. And so with the communication of learning, which we put report in quotations because yes, it is, in a ministry standpoint, it is a report, but it is not a report card that we would see in older grades where there is a grade given or a report on how children are doing or what they're not maybe succeeding in. This is really looking at their key learning, again, their growth in learning, and then the next steps for where their learning is going to take them and where their educators are going to work alongside them to get them to that next level.
And I think the name of communication learning is also important. So you're not, that's exactly what it is. It's a communication of your child's learning. And communication is very critical in kindergarten in terms of helping the understanding of where each child is ready to go. So the word pedagogical documentation is really the strategy that educators use in the classroom. It's a tool to gather evidence of children's learning. So you might see educators, I think me and Amanda were trying to, model it here as best we could around that observing and sort of asking those guided questions. Educators might take photos or videos or notes. And what they're watching is the learning process unfold, because the end result is part of the journey, but really we want to see how learning happens. And then that's where we really direct the students and meet them where they're at. The pieces of documentation are then turned pedagogical when an educator interprets what that documentation shows. And then therefore they use that to then respond, extend, or challenge children's learning. So that's really how they build those next steps and go further. So I would observe, we'll look at some documentation. which is just documentation at this point. And then those next steps an educator team would take to talk about what does this mean about so-and-so's learning, what is there for you to work on, where can we move them forward, and really focusing on asset baseline that Amanda talked about, focusing on what's that key learning, where have we seen growth, and what are those key next steps we need to reinforce throughout the day, and set up learning centers of provocations that will help support those things we want to see. Evidence of children's learning is often shared with families and caregivers at various times throughout the year in a variety of ways. I can speak for myself. I know we often use like the Remind app and different things like that. We have little star moment notes that went home at times. There was phone calls, things like that. So there's lots of ways that we communicate with families. That ongoing communication is important in kindergarten. So we have another little fun task we want you to sort of engage in to kind of bring what we were saying to life a little bit. So what we're hoping to do is get into small groups of maybe even 2 or 3, because there's not as many of us here. Maybe 3 is good, or maybe 4. And we're going to give you a scenario or a case study, so to speak. And what you're going to read through is documentation of Lauren, this child that we've made up, during a typical day in kindergarten. So each group will have a different part of Lauren's day that you can then read through. And we'll kind of give you some time to look at it and then come back together. Makes sense?
Can we just group like?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And we'll go off camera then again as well for chaos and discussion. Control. Okay, all right, we'll see you.
So we wanted to bring you back. We know that we're still working through reading scenarios and sort of what you're noticing. So we want to just bring you back to that, those key points that Nan and I sort of highlighted in the kindergarten program prior. So through that asset-based lens, like what did you notice? What do you wonder based on some of the parts of your case that you had or your day of Lauren's life?
Sure. Left.
Sure.
We'll go left. Okay, we'll go clockwise.
Oh, like they're going first.
Sorry.
Keep this thing. Sure. We have part 3, outdoor time. It seems like Lauren is sensory seeking, and has a hard time with transitions, and was offered some accommodations to help her transitioning. What our scenario was about. And then what we were wondering was, in a large class size with other children who have similar needs to Lauren, or who have needs that are dissimilar to Lauren and might be affected by Lauren's needs and Lauren's accommodations, how that works for everybody.
Maybe we'll go around first. Maybe that's that one. No pressure group.
Okay, go. Part 4, and you said some of the same sorts of things. Lauren has come back in after recess, and it's book time. She's doing a lot of sensory stimulation. There's a wobbly chair mentioned. There's touching sequins on another child's shirt, and then some accommodations like giving her a sensory tool. Then we also honed in on routine and familiarity, because it mentions that she chooses the same book repeatedly. And we wondered about, you had a wonder that you mentioned.
We wondered about her communication skills, and how she communicates. She's communicating using her body and touching other things in the classroom, where the educator is pointing to the picture and speaking, but she's communicating. But we were also wondering about the rhythmic notion of the book she picks. Is she a musical learner? Keep the Cat is very musical and very tactile.
Yeah.
We're part 5, and so Lauren is engaging in center time in the afternoon, and she's been working with stacking rectangular prisms and had a very specific plan on how she wanted them to stack. Yes, yes. And along came someone with a sphere and wanted to put the sphere on the tower, which ended up knocking over the blocks, which caused some concern for Lauren. And so the educators were able to help her communicate by using PEC symbols and offering her some choice as to help support her in her regulation. So there was, in her choice, there was both a gross motor and a quiet sensory activity that she could engage in to help with her regulation. And so she was able to use voice by selecting what she felt she needed to help regulate.
Exactly. Nominate you, John, because you took notes.
We have part 2, and Lauren is basically during the learning center in the morning. We too saw some sensory seeking, and that she's constantly they had tough tray. She was feeling and touching and all the materials within the tough tray, and rubbing her fingers and things like that. We also saw, as far as at one point in time, she ran to another table to seek out basically similar patterns as far as the leaves and so forth. And so she really did recognize pattern skills and symbols as far as that was concerned. But she also she hummed to herself, started looking at was playing with the texture of the paint. So it's sort of self-soothing, it's self-regulation skills as far as that was concerned. But we did wonder as far as her communication skills. She was very observant of the teacher using the PEC symbols, but there didn't seem to be any communication. So we're wondering about communication.
So in part one, when Lauren first arrived at school, and we focused on some pieces that were in place to support the transition. So the visual schedule that she was able to use to transition into the classroom. She followed some structures, some regular routines in the classroom, so was able to line up and take off her things in her cubby and use the visual schedule to remove her jacket. What was neat was she engaged with a classmate around colors. So we were talking about the shirt or soccer shirt that she was wearing, and she indicated that it was green, and the classmate said mine was red, and so there was a back and forth with the peer, and then was able to just follow unzipping, so some independent skills of unzipping backpack or shoes and coat and removing backpack and whatnot.
I think we wonder was sort of like that visual schedule, sort of how did that come about? Was that in place when she came in? How did that evolve? And then looking at the interaction with the classmate in the just in terms of recognizing that inclusion, just to sort of the classmate noticed and said, yeah, I was on the red team and when I played soccer, is just how did that sort of come about? Was that organic? Was that prompted? We need to include Lauren in our conversations, type sort of conversation of what happened. How did that go? How was that conversation?
Absolutely. So we appreciate you reading them. If you want to flip your pages over, Nan and I have pulled expectations in the kindergarten program that on a first glance through of these specific expectations, your scenario saw how these could be expectations that we would then, based on the documentation you have, that we would then potentially work with Lauren on. So whenever we are working with children in kindergarten, we always say, why this learning at this time for this child in this context, right? So obviously there are a lot, and you wouldn't necessarily at each moment pull out all of those. But as you know the students in your space, you would think about what is the most important learning for Lauren at this time? What are those common themes that I'm seeing in Lauren throughout the days in consultation with my teaching partner? And then how are we then teaching those by extending, responding, and challenging and setting up environment that can support that? A lot of your conversations or wonderings and questions that came up, I think had a lot to do with like learning environment. So when we talk about learning environment in kindergarten, we talk about time, space, and materials. And the kindergarten program specifically talks about those things, and that environment as the third teacher. So time, space, materials as that third teacher in the classroom. And our schedule is called the flow of the day in kindergarten. It's not a regimented schedule for that reason. And the kindergarten program really highlights how that should be negotiated and co-constructed with children on an ongoing basis. And so I think a point that came from your table was around recognizing if there's difficulties with transitions for Lauren in this situation, what's happening with the other children in the room. And so this is something you would be able to assess and negotiate as a teaching team and make shifts. And that would be completely a part of the honoring the kindergarten program, right? So if we're noticing that one child's been transitioning, there's too many transitions in the morning, it's probably not good for most of the kids in that classroom. So let's look at minimizing transitions. How could we do that, right? So maybe we're not doing outdoor time at the standard recess. We're doing it, say, in the morning time. So we're not asking kids to come in, get undressed, hang out for an hour, come back out, get dressed again, and maybe it's all while they're still ready to go outside and playing. So there's lots of ways that the kindergarten program, that fluid sort of response, can help to make those accommodations just natural environment to support all students. I think another big piece, and I don't know if it's on the next slide for everybody, we just wanted to highlight again, was the word in the expectations that are there on purpose. So as you can see on the screen here, the expectations are written with sort of those words around show and awareness of, identify, which is finding, It talks about both verbal and nonverbal all the time within the expectations, that it doesn't have to be one or the other. That children will respond through gestures, through body language, whatever the case is. Explore some of the words they use in terms of expectations, participating, doing, investigating, responding to, expressing, building. So those are all the words used in the program. And I feel they're open. The kindergarten program is around that foundation, around how children, we can meet all children where they're at. And that is sort of the philosophy behind it. So we're hoping that.
I can also just jump in. When you were talking about what you noticed or what you were wondering, a lot of observations around some of Lauren's behaviors or some of, the gifts that she brings to the environment. But at no point was there ever a conversation around that those presented barriers in her learning. And I think part of the highlighting of those expectations shows that Lauren is still able to learn in that classroom, regardless of using, PACs to communicate, or regardless of needing to move to a calming corner because there was a moment where maybe she became a little bit dysregulated because of an incident that happened, but that did not prevent Lauren from participating in the learning regardless, which again connects into the kindergarten program. That is how it's presented, is that every child has that ability to participate in the learning, and the learning is responsive to their needs and where they're at. And so just thinking about that, we can talk about, some of what we're observing specifically about Lauren, but at no point was it, posted in a negative way that this is impacting Lauren in a negative way that would impact her future or her lifelong, learning in this space. So just wanted to kind of highlight that all of this, again, focusing on that asset lens of this is what Lauren is presenting, this is where we're going now, Lauren is learning, but here's what the connections we've made.
So just our final thoughts, you can see on the screen, and that brings us to the conclusion.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Jenkins at all?
I have a few because I was the one that brought up the concern originally, so I'll just kind of follow up with that. I like, obviously I love a lot of the stuff that was presented, and I think it really presents like in an ideal situation what every kindergarten learning experience is like for most kids. But my concern is for kids that this doesn't work for. And as much as we want to say, let's be inclusive and everybody can learn well in the same environment, the reality is that's not accurate. So the original concern brought up was about IPRCs for kids in kindergarten. It's being reported to me that it's being denied to multiple kids across the board in different areas. Or if it is being given, it's being given as an informal IEP for some reason instead of as a legal formal document to protect their learning needs. So what about environmental accommodations for learners with sensory needs who aren't able to be successful in a regular classroom? Because as anybody who's been in a regular kindergarten classroom knows, they are very loud, busy, overwhelming places for kids with sensory needs. So if we don't, I wonder how can we meet that accommodation for them if they don't have an IEP stating that they need that accommodation? How can that actually be accommodated if they need to be in a quiet environment?
And I can speak to that. So I think what's important to note, if you think back about all of the bits and pieces you mentioned in terms of accommodations that exist for Lauren in that space, none of those would sit on an IEP, are required to be on an IEP to be in place. So Lauren could have all of those pieces without having an IEP written to support. And many of those were sensory. So I think it comes down to, again, in our last meeting when we were talking about that importance of that connection between home and school and communication with families about the needs of the student and that ongoing communication, that's really the key. As I said, we do have IEPs for students in our system who have needs that can't be met through those accommodations. And certainly they do exist. But for all of the things that we just talked about, you wouldn't require an IEP to have it.
You're correct, but you also have no way of ensuring they're in place without one. And like I said, in an ideal world, that's happening, but in the real world, it's not happening consistently everywhere. So families need to make sure that this is why the IPRC process exists, to provide legal protection for students who have different needs than what most students have. So that's great that the program is flexible to meet the needs of all of these other people, but then they aren't really accommodations if it's just being flexible with all learners. Accommodations means it's something that's significantly different for certain children. And then when you have multiple children in a classroom that have multiple differing needs, and you only have a teacher and an ECE, how are we ensuring that these children are having their needs met? Because if you have an ECE who's busy with one child who won't come inside from recess, and you have a teacher who's helping another child who's soiled himself because they aren't toilet trained, who's helping the rest of the students, who's helping the student who's like overwhelmed with sensory information and needs a break inside of the classroom.
And I think I think the key is what are those supports that exist that respond to the need of the student. So is it an educational assistant, a classroom support staff member that comes and assists? Is it the CERT that's coming to assist? Is it a primary resource to help you build resources in that space? But I think each individual case has to be looked at to the needs of that particular child, and that plan needs to be created with the educator team and alongside parents.
Right, but it all falls into that same pattern though of then people being told, well, you don't have an IPRC and we have other kids who do. So the EAs, we only have 4 EAs at our school. So they're helping these other kids. They can't help your child. They can't take your child for a break out of the classroom. So this is, again, I'm just confused why, like if the board is really feeling like this process is accommodating those children already, and this is an effective process, then what's the problem with encouraging families to formally document their children's learning needs? It sets them up for grade 1 because they're going to need that anyways in grade 1. But there's that legal accountability piece. So I don't understand why we wouldn't, if we really feel like this is meeting the needs of the kids, why we wouldn't just formally document it for families when they're requesting it.
So Jessica, I think you were first.
Okay, yeah, just to kind of echo Shauna, it worries me a little bit when language like strength-based, which obviously is what we want. We don't want to be focusing on weaknesses or deficits, but I think it is important to focus on what a child cannot do, particularly when it comes to toileting, safety concerns, eloping. I think a lot of families have to fight in the first place to even receive a diagnosis, then go on a wait list for services, then go on a wait list for funding for those services. So that by the time they get to school, this is all happened before the child is entered kindergarten, to be told that an IEP is not necessary. It's just compounding upon everything they've had to do to fight for their kid, basically preserving the dignity of their child, I think is what it comes down to. When they have toileting needs and the school is not allowing them or telling them it's necessary to have it on the legal document, that parent is worried, or those families are worried all day about, is their child being properly cared for, supported, accommodated? I think that's where the frustrations from the families that you hear from potentially come from, just those things compounded on top of each other, getting to the educational system and then again being denied what they are rightfully entitled to.
It's interesting that the statement was made that accommodations are made for children in kindergarten and grade 1 without an IEP. My experience, personal experience, was I was pressured to get a diagnosis for my son to have an accommodation, and there was always no extra support, quote unquote, because it was always short-staffed. So we were told that I was pressured to get a diagnosis for him at that time, for him to even have any support for him at that tender age. This is actually why I'm actually here today. So as she said, I can attest to what she said. This is the ideal presentation, but the reality that parents are facing out there with the accommodation, with the supports, it's not really showing the real true picture.
Should feedback. And accommodations, just to clarify, accommodations are available to all students at any time in any grade. Modifications. So when we're looking at IEPs, we start modifying curriculum and changing curriculum expectations for students would be what we're putting on IEP. So an accommodated IEP is not as common as they used to be because those accommodations are available to all students. Any student can have access to an accommodation. If we start modifying programming and changing curriculum expectations based on where a student's at, then that gets documented in IEP under modification. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the feedback. I think it would be worth a deeper conversation about what kind of information goes on an IEP. I can bring that forward, I think, to a future meeting if that's of interest, because there are some things that we've had conversations about that typically go on IEP, and other things that wouldn't. And I think we need some clarification.
I think this is warranting enough conversation and enough concerns. And that might be helpful. Sure. Yes, I'm sorry, I don't think I'd say this, but on that note about, accommodations are available to every single student. But I don't know, that's fantastic, that's great. I personally haven't been in classrooms where that was the case for me. But at what point does disability, or somebody that has a learning disability or that thing, how does that kind of set a precedent? If every student can get an accommodation, that's fantastic, that's what should be happening. But I think having that legal document, even in kindergarten, saying, hey, these accommodations are flexible. This is what has to be done for the student, as opposed to it would be nice if this could be done, that's what the big difference is. It's not it's like that legal document. In my own experience and in experience with me helping other parents, it's very much been before it's oh, it'd be nice for you to do that, you don't have the resources, but then once it's in a legal form, it's it has to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll see.
Sean.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention as well, just to kind of go off of what Jessica was saying. I agree with everything that was said. I like the idea of having an asset lens when we're talking about children, and looking at their strengths and not focusing on deficits per se. But at the same time, just as a point of clarification, I feel like sometimes this conversation can swing too far one way, where then we want to pretend that disabilities don't exist. And we forget to acknowledge that some people do have limits. So we can't just say oh, well, they can still do it. If somebody is a wheelchair user and they can't walk, they can't walk. It's ridiculous to say, well, maybe one day they can, maybe some wheelchair users can one day walk depending on their medical circumstances, but some just can't. Never. They will never be able to do that. And it's not a deficit, it's just a fact. So I get a little bit concerned when I hear language like that tries to, the optics of it to me are to try to cover up the reality, and it's this rose-colored glasses. I don't want to look too deeply at what the reality here is, but the reality is some kids do have limits, right? If you have an intellectual disability, you have limits. There's certain things you will not be able to do. It doesn't mean you can't grow. It doesn't mean you can't learn, but you have limits. If you have a physical disability, you have limits. And it's not a bad thing to acknowledge what those limits are. And actually, I feel like it's very harmful. And I think most disabled people would agree that it's very harmful to make them feel like they can achieve something that actually is not something they can achieve. It would be really harmful to tell a wheelchair user that if they just tried hard enough, they would be able to get up and walk. Just as it's really harmful to tell an ADHD child that if they just tried hard enough, they could sit down and be quiet and learn without giving them their legally entitled accommodations, which need to be documented on an IEP. They need breaks, they need fidget tools, right? Like they need sensory tools in order to meet that need. And at the same time, every time they have to do that extra work to meet that baseline of what everybody else can do, that's causing them a lot of mental and emotional drain. So then to keep expecting that they do more and more and more and more is going to be very harmful to their mental health as well. So we need to be really careful, I think, about how we frame what does an asset lens mean? What do disabilities mean? And that disability isn't a bad word. It's not a bad thing to acknowledge that for people. And actually it can be really empowering for disabled people to know that it's actually okay to be disabled. It's actually okay.
Any other questions, comments, Donna?
Just that I think it's really a balance, a real balancing, and I think that that's somewhat because when I did read some of the words and I saw that and because I know I've lived through the time where you had to write all the negative things down for the child in order to get funding. Well, that's no longer the case, but it also restricted because of the fact that the thought process was that we had to identify all this. So it restricted the actual, there was assumptions that were being made automatically for certain individuals within the classroom, particularly, that they could not achieve. Well, they probably could. So I recognize it's really a balance that we have to put in here and in the document that, yes, we don't want to focus on the negative, but we also have to say with additional, because I think I've told the story before, where a young man who I coached, and he was 26 at the time, and it was basically teaching how to skip, and the mother basically said, "Oh, they tried to teach him in school, never did. Why tell him how to skip at 26 years old?" It's just that I had a different context, a different time trying to do it. It took a good 6 months to get him to do a couple of skips, but I had the time and that was part of the focus. So I think it's again, yes, you want to say this is a disability, they might not be able to achieve it, but they might not be able to achieve it just in the context of the school at that time too. So I think it's a real balancing and we kind of, I'm not sure how to change those words because I think for educators, it's a real balancing act.
It's also important to stop on because for those students that are just have disability, but will also end up eventually, even like though it'll be so hard to talk about early year stuff, but also in general, like when we're talking, like when you get to university, you also do need those weak points. You need to tell them what you can't do, or you do not get accommodated at all. So are we really sending everybody up for success? But you like, oh, this is what you're good at because I just graduated university. I need accommodations. You have to tell them exactly what you cannot do. You have to have documentation to prove you cannot do it, or they will not accommodate you. It's just that's just how it goes when you get to a secondary, like it's post-secondary institutions. And so if we're only writing positive things in the IEPs or like modified curriculum, most universities don't do that. So if there's no history of accommodation, it becomes much, much harder to then have that accommodation built in post-secondary, which is not setting people up for like students up for success in the long, like once they're out of the DDSB. If that makes any sense. I'm just I'll add one, sort of echoing a little bit, sort of along with Donna in terms of balance. Acknowledging like the whole concept of kindergarten. And I know this was the one thing that I was told when Adam joined was it's a 2-year program. Don't panic, right? So this is a 2-year spectrum of stuff that they're going to be able to do. And they might not be able to do it the first year or the first semester or the second or whatever that is. Don't panic. Same time, I also had a child who was not being tutored. He had not learned how to
himself. So we needed to figure out how that was going to work. And he did get an IEP because we needed to make sure that we got the appropriate levels of support. And I think that's kind of where my worry comes in, is when we say that we don't need an IEP. Technically, no. For all of the things for Adam to do the stuff in kindergarten and the learning to do numbers and all of that was great. But then as soon as it came to the stuff that was outside those pieces, unless we wrote it down, the ministry was giving us nothing for it. And that's where the system fails our kids, because we don't have all of the resources, including from a personnel and a safety standpoint, to make sure that everyone's needs are met. And I think that's where we need to have that balance again, to say we don't necessarily need to document everything in kindergarten that is essentially part of the kindergarten program from a needs and strengths and a skill building standpoint. But these are the things that are really important. We need to make sure that those resources and those accommodations that matter, and it is a spectrum and it is a threshold. So I'm not going to say what should there, should not be there, but we should be able to do that without too much worry, because it should complement everything that's already going on in the kindergarten program. And that's where I think, for me, that's where it is, that it almost seems like it's a black and white. So we don't need it. But I had one, and I know I have parents who had, so, and then we're getting parents who are being told, well, you don't need one. I'm like, so is it and we said that anybody can have access to that accommodation. Anybody can have access to an IEP if a request is made. So there is an inequity in the execution down at the individual school levels. And so maybe that reinforcement of why is this here? Why is this available? Why does it make sense? Let's have a conversation with the team, with the children at that level. My kid's in high school now, and he's got an IEP and just started going through the cycle already, and reading it up tonight and gonna send it back tomorrow. So, been there, done that when I was in school. When I was in kindergarten, dear Lord, I was petrified. You have parents that have been coming in. I came in with resources for accepting children and youth. I had Grandview involved at one point, and you're so scared of this big black hole that is school system. And then if you want to tell them no when they've been fed all of these things, and here's all the problems that my kid has, and still not toiling, and I don't know how I'm going to feed them. And then to be told no, it's really frightening and really irritating. And I'm already getting emotional. And, so those are the things that we can do that for the parents, that goes a long way to building the communication, the trust, and that rapport, and that team that we've been talking about. That how do we build that team around the child, and center it around that thing, which is, all of these pieces are building blocks on that. Sorry. Okay, Sean, sorry. Go.
I have
The last one.
two thoughts here. The first one is around the mention of EACE as well, because this has come up before as well. So again, sorry, it's getting late. My brain's getting really tired. If we don't have it formalized that children have a diagnosis and they need specific supports, and even with that, I will say, even with that, I am hearing from many families, even going into grade 1, that they are being told, we cannot guarantee any VA support, even if the child's not toileted, even if going into grade 1, so you only have one educator in the room who's not supposed to be helping with toileting according to their union regulations. They're being told, parents are being told, we can't guarantee any time with an EA, even if the child needs breaks. So when we talk about, well, accommodations, that can be a conversation with the school. Well, the school is having those conversations, and they're telling families, no, we can't guarantee it. So you have a lot of very upset, stressed out, worried families. So part of, I think, building that trust with families is having the needs and accommodations clearly outlined in an IEP, a legal IEP, not an informal IEP. Informal IEPs are fine if you decide to start using them for kids who don't have a qualified identification. But when you have kids starting kindergarten who have an autism diagnosis or who have a physical disability, I don't understand why they're being told you don't need an IPRC, because like what, they might grow out of it. That's not something that no autistic kid is suddenly not autistic. They're always autistic for the rest of their life. Same with people with physical disabilities. Same with any of the other identifications. That's why they exist. So I don't understand why we aren't documenting it for those reasons. And if those reasons aren't real reasons, then let's clarify, like, why are families being told that? Because a lot of families are. My last thought is just off of what Tara said was, if we don't have it documented, because the ministry looks at I would imagine the ministry is looking at our IEP numbers and our special education numbers. I feel like this is just playing into like this provincial delusion of we don't need to fund education, because when they're seeing numbers that say, oh wow, look at, you have, how many kindergarten students do we have on the board? Okay, and only 300 have IEPs, and those aren't even formal IEPs. They're going to say, yeah, that's fine. 2 educators in the room is plenty. But what's the reality, right? So if we aren't documenting what special education needs are in the board with this formal process that was put in place by the ministry, how is the ministry supposed to know what our needs are to adjust their funding formula? Because then they can just keep saying, oh, clearly we don't need it because there's not that many numbers of kids with IEPs. But at least they can't convince themselves that they're doing the right thing then, right?
They're still using language 10 years ago. It's compounded. Easy to say, but you're not. No answers. I do, so Lauren, you had a suggestion that perhaps we for a future meeting come back and actually like include some more conversation on the AP. Would that be helpful? Just in terms of what should be in, like what is in an IP, and we just sort of talked about like writing it, guidelines and things like that. Like, would that be helpful for this group, or not just?
Personally, I don't know if it would be. I don't know what everyone's knowledge of an IEP is, or what an accommodation is versus what a modification is. And I think at kindergarten, there is no modification to the curriculum that is being requested because there is no grading going on. So it is purely accommodation. So I don't know that clarification of that would be helpful, because it is purely accommodation that person needs.
Okay, that means fair. That's absolutely good. Okay. So that was community concern number 1.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Very much appreciate you for all of that. That's again, that's, and any information that we can get just in terms of what it is, it's always very helpful. And you inspired a very healthy conversation. They were very passionate around this table, so we apologize for the extra rounds. But we all very much appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Sitting at time, do we want to go number 2? Whatever. What is the subject of number 2?
Safety plans and EA support not being guaranteed, and parents being asked to pick up a student if escalation.
Do we want to take the time to go through that? And we pushed it off from last month already, so I sort of would feel that we had to put it again, but knowing that it is quarter to 8, what would we like to?
I mean, I'd like to talk about it. It was my concern that was brought up, so it's a little.
I just want to make sure again, that's where we're kind of going with that. So why don't we take some time and look at it, more, and have some conversation about that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what was brought forth was a situation where there's a safety plan in place, and within the safety plan, it indicates that if that parents will be contacted if a staff member, if there's an escalation that is not able to find resolution to the escalation with the student. And it says, while at the same time, EA support is not being guaranteed, This practice raises important questions about whether we're providing truly inclusive support if students are left without assistance and as a result excluded from education. So just in terms of safety plan, the safety plan, when written correctly, is designed to be both proactive and reactive to a situation, and needs to ensure that there's a safe environment, prevent risk of injury behaviors for that student. So when we develop our safety plans, we should be consulting with parents as part of that process and in partnership to determine what that appropriate support strategy looks like. There are many circumstances where a parent, I've been in the conversation with parents where they say, I don't want my child to be upset for any more than if you're using all the strategies that are in the safety plan and you're not able to de-escalate, I want to be. So that has happened. I've been in those situations. But what we want to make sure is that when we develop that plan, it's in consultation with family. It's not just without that conversation. Sometimes there's situations where an appropriate support strategy centers the dignity of the student. And that might include the parent responding to an issue that arises. So there are times even with the correct supports in place, and as I said, strategies outlined in the plan, they've all been implemented and it continues to be risk of injury for that particular student. We may ask parents to be called to support the risk of injury to both students and staff. Again, I'm going to say it again, and I think it's going to be really important. We're not going to be able to get to it tonight, but in our work that we do in response to the SEAC survey, we're coming back to that importance of building that home-school connection and communication again about placing the student at the center. This is really about what's best for students, and how do we respond in a way that supports that. Having a student picked up by a parent should be a very temporary support measure, and it's important that if that happens, there needs to be a debrief and a review of the safety plan with the school team and the family to determine what the additional supports are and strategies that need to be considered to address that particular need for that student. Obviously, the goal of that safety plan is always to reduce the intensity and the frequency of these behaviors. And if it's not, then it needs to be revisited until we figure it out. I will say there are some times where it's not here in the moment. And that's to maintain the dignity of the student. And schools are, as you know, social environments. And there is a requirement for us to provide a safe learning and working environment for students and staff. So what we know is that when the correct programming is in place and the supports and structures are the right ones, we see a reduction of risk of injury behaviors. And so the process of fine-tuning those supports can sometimes take time for us, but that should be an ongoing collaboration with families and such a part of that process.
How can we get the parents' knowledge of how the safety plan is made? Because most of the parents, including myself, have no knowledge of how the safety plan. We're not involved. For my own, I'm giving it from my own self. The school made a safety plan and gave it to me. My son was an eloper, and I worked all the way in Richmond Hill. And every time they called me at work, I have to pick up my son. Even in the simplest of situations. And maybe if I had known that I could have given feedback or input in this document, it would have made things better. Because now I was labeled at work the girl with problem child because she had to leave work all the time to pick up her son at school. So I think it's very imperative and important that parents that are in my similar circumstances are aware that they could be collaborative in this circumstance. That's my feedback.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying about them being appropriately written. So what is the board doing then to ensure that staff have the training to write them in an appropriate way, to make sure that if there is something like that that is needed, that it is a temporary solution? So what's the process for making sure that they are written appropriately and that if there is something like that in place, if there's like a end date for it, there's a way to transition out of that as a stopgap emergency measure.
Process. And it's built right into the same kind of when the next group that you have to wait when it will be reviewed with family. And Sean, I'm gonna be honest, due to the role, I don't necessarily know the answer to that question of what previous training looked like. But it's a good question and I can certainly find out. I just don't, I'm not sure if we
Okay. Like my worry, because it's been more than one family again where I've seen this in place where this has been written in either as parent will come and pick up child if staff can't manage this, or where it's been written in as a permanent modified day. Parent will come and pick up child at lunch every single day. So I don't think it's fair to say that the regular class is the most inclusive placement for all children if we're actually excluding children by putting them on modified days or by having parents come and remove them because they aren't actually being properly included. So I would want to know what are we doing to prevent this? If we want to say this is inclusive, then what are we doing to prevent that? Because that's not inclusion.
Can I ask Shauna, if you have those phone calls, any further phone calls, can you please share contact information for system leads and forward the parent directly to the system lead?
Yeah. But my worry is that there's a lot of parents out there who don't even know to contact us. Yeah. This is my concern with the whole process is it's a very overwhelming process for a lot of families. And we have a lot of people in our board who are multiple language learners, right? They don't speak English at home. And even if the kids do, the parents might not. So navigating this system is really confusing for them. They don't know how to advocate. They don't know what questions to ask. And even if they are English speaking and born in Canada and well educated, it's still a really overwhelming, confusing process if you don't know where to look and who to talk to and what questions to ask. So like a lot of families don't even know that they can ask for an IPRC, even though we have an IPRC guide. And then if they're being told no by principals, then they just accept that because they don't know that they're actually legally entitled to it. So what can we do to kind of stop the gatekeeping? Because I don't know that it's benefiting anybody. All it's doing is like pushing the problem into the future so that we have kids in older grades with really significant behaviors because they didn't have their needs met at an early age.
I think, sorry, I think had we had time, that would have been a perfect segue into the role of SEAC in terms of advising on what that could look like. It's built into the conversation on the wall. So we'll look at whatever you prefer, but I certainly think that would be a great thing that we could sit as a collective here and make recommendations in terms of next steps.
And we just add, welcome to the club, Shauna. You have just said exactly what we've been saying on stage for years. Same thing is parents don't understand this system. It is a big black hole, scary institution. And we have great people around the table and we have great ideas and we have people who care, but it doesn't get all the way through the system so that parents don't know what their rights are and what the responsibilities are and that sort of thing. So it's yes. Okay. So George,
To add to that, I've had in the short time I've been out of school myself, which has been since April. Okay. I've had multiple parents that I've talked to just literally say to me that they have absolutely no idea what they can even ask for, what they can even look at, what they're even like. A lot of them are like, well, it's about what building around your child's needs. Great. What are like, why are there no like, I mean, there are basic like things like on like the ministry's website of like basic accommodations that you can look at and ask for. But why is it that more easily accessible to parents in the first place? Why do they have to go digging for it? Why isn't it just handed to them? Is my question.
Sean?
Yeah, and one of the things that is really a communication piece because we've had it like dating myself back way back when we held the actual first parents for on session on IEPs. And I just remember going, and I belonged to FAFSA and so forth, and they said to me, oh my God, from other boards, you actually did that? You're brave. Because, and I thought that was really a bizarre argument because she wanted parents to have the resources. And we have a lot of resources. But I also recognize that in the past, we also had very strong associations that had additional resources to provide sessions on IEPs. And so we don't have that anymore. Our associations all run by volunteers, and we don't have the ability to do that. And this is where I really have an issue with that. The community resources are just not there. They're overstrapped, so they can't spend the time. And so that's the one thing I can say as a trustee. I can spend the time on the phone for an hour and say, okay, this is what you do. And I'll send the document. Okay, give me your email. I'll send you a document. Here's the resources. And I read this section particularly, and so that you can understand. If you have any questions, call me back. You don't have the time. The teacher doesn't have the time. The administrator doesn't have the time to do that as well. So, I'm really think that as, this is one thing I've thought about quite a bit was in my next life or whatever, is putting, having sort of like a 411 or a 211 of all the associations being able to provide. We talked about a video as far as that was concerned, which is really all those things that we have to do because everywhere they're short of time and resources. And somehow collectively we have to get something together that is more readily available so that we can refer parents to, and in multiple languages and in multiple formats, because this has been an immediate problem, but it's only gotten worse over the years because our volunteers our associations don't have the time or the resources.
I think we're with Shauna and then
Allison can go
Okay.
first. That's fine.
Mine is really quick. It's just adding on to what's been said, that in addition to miscommunication and not knowing your rights or not having English as native like English proficiency, I think the other thing we have to remember that these are parents who are fighting battles on so many fronts in healthcare, funding applications, education, and so they choose their battles. So the first time you encounter a no from an unreceptive administrator, for example, you have to weigh the odds. Will I save my cognitive and emotional energy for that fight, or will I fight this battle? And I think it's very unique about this group of the families that we are all connected to, is they are exhausted and everything is an uphill climb.
Burnout is a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. And so my last comment about the safety plans that has come to light through these discussions is just as well as the concern around that was already mentioned. When I see the documentation of antecedents for whatever the risk-like behavior is on them, I'm not seeing it being written as actual antecedents. I'm seeing things like child is self-injuring, child is banging their head, child is already crying or screaming, child is running away. Those aren't antecedents. Those are a child in crisis. That's already like this problem has escalated too far. And my question is, how is the board addressing staff training to appropriately identify antecedents, and not just training, but like actual like support for the educators in the classroom, because sometimes when you're managing many children with many different needs, it's really difficult to watch and observe and be able to track back from a behavior what the antecedent is. And sometimes it's not as easy as there was a loud sound and the kid ran away. It could be there were multiple loud sounds throughout the morning, and then suddenly a change in routine, and then 4 other things happened, and then the child ran away. So how is the board supporting with like a behavior team or additional like education assistants or administrative assistants in the classroom when we have a child who's on a safety plan to identify the antecedents appropriately, and the training for staff to recognize what an appropriate antecedent is when they're documenting it? Because we can't, if we're just reporting like, oh, the child's self-injuring, how are we actually going to stop that behavior from happening in the future? So we need to be appropriately doing this. Now, my concern is that over the past 10 years or so, there's been this shift in education where we used to have qualified special education teachers teaching special education classes who had training to recognize these things. Now we're integrating students into regular classes, but we don't have special education teachers anymore teaching these classes. We just have regular teachers, many of whom did their teacher training before this shift happened. So they do not have special education training to recognize these things. So how can the board, or how is the board improving their staff awareness, their staff training about these aspects of special education, so that they can appropriately recognize them? And how are we supporting the staff to actually do that while still teaching a class?
And I'll bring the information back to you around training or safety plans. I can tell you that I don't know historically what that has looked like in terms of how we've supported students with creating, supporting the regular safety plans. We certainly do have instructional facilitators, psych services staff who do that in my buildings have come alongside to help me write those safety plans, work alongside the CERT. So there's absolutely central support that works alongside. I just don't know the answer to the past training.
Okay, I'd like to see that there's like a formal process for the board to have in place for this, so that it's not just like, well, if a teacher knows to call this instructional leader, then they do. But if they don't know that, then they're just left floundering on their own. And same with the parent consultation process, which we touched on in our last meeting a little bit, where because again, as you mentioned, Lauren, parents should be involved in consulting for these types of things, because parents would be a great resource to say, what are the antecedents for significant behavior? And that can be attached, because, correct me if I'm wrong, like I don't feel like a child should have a safety plan if they don't have an IEP. It's possible it occurs, but I think most of the time they should probably have an IEP if they have a safety plan to document their alternative learning needs. And when we make an IEP, we should be consulting with parents. And we were told last time by Connor that that consultation is supposed to be happening, but it doesn't sound like there's an actual process that's put in place by the board, where it's just kind of like, well, I guess if one school feels like calling the parents and asking, then they can. But if another school doesn't, there's not really any, like there's no consistency across the board. So how can we make this consistent to address this issue?
Yeah. All
right.
Okay, sure. Sorry. I think the safety plans, oftentimes in my it's like kids handle something until they're not handling it anymore. Like, shouldn't safety plans have like be more focused on built-in like stuff that would be in a normal IEP, like built-in breaks, so that way a child does not get to that point where they're self-harming or harming other students or having like a meltdown. Why, like, if a safety plan when a child is in crisis, it should be to avoid the child going into crisis.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It has sections for.
Okay. Yeah.
It should.
Yeah.
It would make
It's a,
sense.
it's a formal section in the plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, yes. Good. All right. Moving on. If we are okay, because we are very much, and the Jays game has just started, just FYI. Everybody. You know where my brain is right now. Can we push the action plan, the CX survey? Is that, is that okay? Do we want to? We'll do that next month. Everyone's all right with that, just because it's. And there was also the draft letter, so we talked about the core education timing funding document. We've talked this a couple of times now. Are we done with feedback on this?
I think so.
I think it was received. Okay. So if we're okay to go forward with this, then I think we just need a motion to fire it off, or are we just good to go now? If you want a motion to read it, we're just good to go at this point. We're good to go. We're good to go at this point. It's in your stuff. If you want to read it, it's perfect. Eva will sign it and send it. I think we're good to go with that. I don't think we have any association or association reports listed. So, correspondence. So we have a sad and a yay all at the same time. So Liz, Liz Daniels, our member at large, just let us know that she will be vacating her position for member at large. However, that is because she is going to become ELD alternate rep to help Rowan out with learning disability. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Do we have a motion to approve Elizabeth Daniel as our alternate for the LDA and Jen?
Refrain from.
Yes. Jen, seconds. Joey, all in favor? Okay.
Well, yeah, it goes to the
officially,
so you know, as far as so that you can go for it's already in there as
yes.
It's already.
We anticipated that it would probably.
And then I see I'm going to reinstitute another group of as far as the members.
Yes, so then yes, that means we have an open spot for a member at large. So then we could submit an an invitation for nominations, self-nominations of people who would like to be member at large.
You're already on it and ready to go.
Okay, all right, so we just need a motion to say yes. Yes. Would anybody like to put forth a motion that we would like to open up posting for our now vacated member at large, assuming that we get passed by trustee by the board next month? Later this month. Tuesday. I don't know, Jay's game's on, it's fine. All right. Jessica, seconds. Allison, all in favor? Motion passed. Thank you. Fire away. It'd be great. Okay. Yeah. So we put posting up. That will probably mean we're going to need a subcommittee to evaluate and make a recommendation. Generally, it just takes too long to go through all of it. So if anybody is interested in joining that subcommittee, we usually get 2 or 3 people. Like to do a review of Jessica. Absolutely. Thank you. Dan. Anything else? I know Ava will probably be in if no one else wants for sure. So, I'll speak for her. She's going to do it now. She's volunteering.
I'm volunteering.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeremy. Tell your mom. He's going to do this. I can be a third, unless anybody else would like to. I've done it multiple times now, so I'm okay with doing whichever. So I can Anybody else would like to provide their input in? It's fun. We go for dinner. It's great, you know. You know, you gotta eat whilst you're making important decisions. All right, okay, so we've got Jessica, we've got Eva. I'll do the third one. Work that out. Thank you. Oh, this second page, good lord. All right, on to our next celebrations and successes. Does anybody have anything to share? Let's. It's no secret around the table that I'm a speech language pathologist, and this is a professional success, but it's also relevant to our special needs children in the region. I am employed in a hospital setting. My primary caseload is in dysphagia management, which is difficult solving. And we have noticed that there's a gap in Durham region where we aren't able, up until recently, haven't been able to offer video fluoroscopic swallow studies, which is an instrumental X-ray assessment of swallowing done in the radiology department in a hospital setting with pediatric populations. Up until recently, our kids in Durham region were being sent into Toronto for that test. And we developed an initiative, including recruiting a speech pathologist into the role to be able to open up that opportunity for that assessment to be done for our children closer in the region. So I am now part of that project, and we were successful in performing our very first X-ray in the pediatric population on August 26th. So that's awesome. Anybody else got anything? I have no item stories this month. Honestly, I swear nothing is going on with my kid. He's very excited about his 19th birthday. That's all I'm going to say. It's been nothing but I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to have a beer. So I will regale you with that story next month. Donna, yes.
I will say that a lot of local governance week next week. Next week is Canadian Down Syndrome Awareness Week, right?
Yes.
As far as that's concerned. Yeah. And so what was interesting is that as you're aware, Victoria does do a speech about what it means to have Down syndrome. And she got a recommendation from a teacher that moved to another school. So she got invited to do a presentation at another school in Pickering, which was great. So her client base is growing. Her client base is growing. So she's doing, we ended up doing a 2-for-1. She's doing presentations on during the most of the day around what it means to have Down syndrome. And then I'm going to go do a presentation for the parents and the grade 5 students about basically local governance and trustees, the role of trustees. So they got a 2-for-1 deal.
My son got chosen to be in the Black Belt candidate, so he's going for his testing next month. Early next month, it is really boosted his confidence.
Excellent. All right. Next SEAC meeting, November 6th. That's like what, 3 weeks away?
Yeah.
3 weeks away. At Grandview Kids North, Norwood. Fancy. Nope. Location, people. That's not. All right, that down now. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Donna, second. Yes, all in favor. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks. Don't get those.